a psychological weight that costs more than any marketing budget in the world. I mean, we're talking about the sheer, just relentless expenditure required to maintain a perfect, completely flawless facade in this high-speed, hyper-connected world.
It's the ultimate cost of purity. It really is.
Yeah.
When a country's biggest and, most successful cultural export, what everyone calls the Hallyu wave, the Korean wave, is built entirely on an image of precision, innocence, beauty, this dazzling talent, then the mechanisms you need to produce that perfection, well, they become the exact same mechanisms that have to hide all the structural rot underneath.
They're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. They have to be.
And that is the core tension we really need to get into today, isn't it? This breathtaking spectacle of global cultural dominance, K-pop, K-dramas, the whole package coexisting, layer upon layer, with these deep, really complex structures of corruption, intense exploitation, and systemic violence.
And the numbers are just staggering.
They are. You see these projections that the value of this Hallyu market, which was already massive at around, $76 billion?
Yeah, something like that.
It could potentially soar as high as $198 billion by 2030. That's just unprecedented cultural momentum.
And that explosive financial growth, it's not just about catchy songs or, beautifully shot dramas. It's powered by what analysts are calling a meticulously constructed fandom economy.
The fandom economy, right.
It's a system that's specifically designed to leverage emotional connection, not just casual interest. And critically, it uses the fear of missing out FOMO to drive consumer behavior, to drive subscription loyalty and mass mobilization.
So the product being sold isn't just a song.
No, not at all. The product is often an idealized, innocent, emotionally intense connection with the idol. That's what's actually being sold.
So our deep dive today is into that hidden machinery that makes it all possible. How does this global perfection coexist with what we could call the shadow economy? We're going to analyze how the relentless commercial engineering of K-pop idols connects directly to systemic digital violence like the Nth Room.
Right.
The architecture of corruption that was laid bare in the Burning Sun scandal, and the hidden, just staggering economics of criminalized sex work in South Korea.
So our mission is to trace the lines.
Exactly. Trace the lines from the stage light all the way down into the darkness below, to find the point where the facade breaks and you can finally see the coercive gears turning.
To even start, we have to unpack this fundamental concept, what we're calling the pristine product. K-pop idols aren't just, discovered stars who got lucky. They are meticulous, multi-million-dollar investments. They are calculated risks that agencies manage over years and years.
They are quite literally engineered from the ground up. They're designed to meet a global aesthetic and a global performative standard. I mean, we're talking about trainees being signed and entering this unbelievably rigorous system, some as young as 10 years old.
Oh, yeah. It's a total immersion education system. It often involves years of living together in dorms where their entire focus, their whole world, becomes about mastery.
And the curriculum, it goes so far beyond just vocal lessons and complex choreography, which are, those are demanding enough on their own.
The training extends into these really detailed workshops for things like self-grooming, actual lessons on how to take the perfect selfie, and media training that dictates every single public interaction.
Every moment is curated.
Every single moment. Every word is managed to build this discipline and, above all, marketable persona.
And the ultimate goal is to mold a flawless public image that the global audience, and this is the crucial part, the Korean audience, wants to consume and wants to protect.
And essential to that marketable persona is purity and availability. Idols are universally disallowed from dating, and it's often with explicit clauses in their contracts, precisely to maintain this innocent, available image for fans to project their fantasies onto. They're subjected to intense public life management, and if they slip up emotionally, personally, or even physically, the consequences are immediate. They're financial. And often they're irreversible.
And the pressure related to the physical aesthetic it's arguably the most pervasive and insidious form of control.
Well, the bodies of the idols are, after all, the primary product being sold.
Absolutely. That anecdote shared by Han Sung-yeon, a member of the group Kara, it offers such a harrowing glimpse into this world. She talks specifically about the extreme dieting required for promotions, where they were forced to wear these incredibly restrictive outfits like crop tops and low-rise pants. There was just no room for error.
And that kind of professional pressure, it leads to these tragic extremes in personal behavior. She recounted secretly eating a black sesame rice cake, I mean, a tiny innocuous thing, and then feeling such overwhelming guilt that she forced herself to vomit, which led directly to a diagnosis of anorexia and depression. This wasn't a personal flaw. It was a physiological and psychological reaction to an unbearable professional requirement for extreme thinness.
And here's where the power dynamic gets really interesting. When we talk about enforcement, it's not just the agencies and the CEOs enforcing these standards.
No.
It's the consumers themselves. The Korean netizens, or nets as they're known, often function as the most aggressive policing force.
The fans become actively complicit in the system of control.
Yeah.
We've seen just countless examples of netizens fiercely criticizing idols for gaining minuscule amounts of weight, sometimes described as gaining 0.1 centimeters or having swollen faces.
The language they use is so intense.
It is. They use this incredibly shaming language, labeling the appearance as shameful and arguing that the idol clearly cannot manage themselves if they look that way.
So the public demands that the human product remains pristine.
Yes, which entirely validates the punishing weight control system that the agencies impose in the first place. It's a feedback loop.
And this all points to something deeply rooted in the wider culture, right? Far beyond just the entertainment industry. South Korea has earned this reputation as the plastic surgery capital of the world. And procedures like the double eyelid surgery, creating a crease in the eyelid, they aren't just elective personal choices anymore.
No, they're routine. We know they're often given as high school graduation gifts.
A graduation gift.
That normalization is so critical to understand. It transforms aesthetic enhancement from a mere personal desire into a social expectation. It's a societal mandate for conformity to a very narrow, very rigid, and you could argue a Eurocentric definition of beauty.
And the K-pop idol system just takes that societal mandate and weaponizes it for maximum commercial advantage.
Exactly. The idol's body itself becomes a form of currency, and that currency has to be constantly exchanged for social capital and fan approval, which means it can never, ever falter.
So the moment that currency is devalued by weight gain, by aging, by having a flawed past, or the ultimate sin, dating the system, and the fans who have bought into this fantasy, they react violently to protect their investment.
And that reaction, which is often a form of narrative violence, leads us directly into the cracks in that facade, especially when you're dealing with accusations of past misconduct, like that wave of school bullying scandals that just rocked the K-pop world a few years ago.
This is where the legal architecture of South Korea becomes utterly fascinating, because it puts the corporate strategy, the need to protect the asset, into an impossible position. To understand this, you really have to understand the specific, very complex nuances of Korean defamation law.
It's truly unique. There's nothing else like it globally because it recognizes two distinct types of defamation. Defamation based on false claims.
Right, the normal kind.
And defamation based on true claims. In simple terms, you can be sued for defamation, even if what you said is 100% true, if a court believes your intention in revealing that truth was malicious or just intended to damage the reputation of the accused.
And this creates a severe legal trap for the entertainment agencies. Let's just walk through a hypothetical. Say a former classmate claims that Idol X was verbally abusive during middle school.
Okay.
If the company wants to sue that accuser for defamation, they have to legally declare whether the claims are true or false as part of the process.
And if the claims against Idol X are true, the company almost never files the lawsuit. And why would they? Because doing so would force them to implicitly admit in a public legal forum that the damaging behavior occurred. And that could still be prosecutable as defamation based on the truth.
It's a commercial lose-lose scenario for them. Acknowledge the truth, and you risk the idol's career and the company's stock price.
Yeah.
Or fight it as a lie and risk being publicly exposed and caught in perjury.
This legal tightrope, though, it gives accusers or survivors a really unique pathway to come forward. They're often protected from a successful defamation suit if they can prove the behavior they described actually happened, even if the idol's career is destroyed as a result.
But even when that legal pressure is applied, the narrative remains so fluid, it's often impossible to really resolve.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, take the case of Chu, for example. She faced these allegations of having ostracized classmates and engaging in verbal insults. And her agency, Blockberry Creative, they immediately threatened criminal complaints for defamation. It's the standard corporate defense mechanism.
Right, the playbook.
But then the initial accuser posted an update, and this is the messy part, admitting they had exaggerated their claims. They stated explicitly that their memories had become dramatized over time because they weren't on good terms with the idol.
And you'll never know if that apology was coerced or genuine.
Never. But the damage had already been done, and the corporate narrative was suddenly thrown into complete confusion.
That ambiguity is the perfect feeding ground for fan toxicity and corporate pressure. The line between what's a genuine memory, what's trauma, and what's just online exaggeration becomes completely blurry. Yet, the damage to the idol's public image and their career is immediate, it's overwhelming, and it's often permanent.
And what's so crucial here is that the fans don't wait for legal resolution. They become active, weaponized agents in this corporate pressure cooker. We saw this with extreme clarity in the case of the DCG Idol Gallery, which is a massive fan community. They were absolutely relentless in demanding Sujin leave the group after her bullying accusations came out.
They leverage their financial power and their organization in a way that truly demonstrates the fandom economy at work.
They collected over $1,000 in a single day, just for donations to send a protest flower tree, a physical sign of their collective outrage to the agency's headquarters. And they were ready to escalate. They were threatening to send an LED truck, which costs nearly $1,000 a day, with the explicit demand that the school violence perpetrator should be leaving the group, not self-reflect.
That's the fandom economy weaponized against the product itself. They are demanding moral perfection, and they have the capital and the digital organization to enforce that demand. They're essentially firing an idol they deem morally impure, regardless of what the agency even wants.
And nowhere is this moral policing more fiercely contradictory and, frankly, commercially dictated than in the area of romance and sexualization. The standard is fundamentally gendered, it's profoundly unequal, and it is purely a commercial decision.
We see this so clearly in the dating disaster fallout. When female idols, especially members of top-tier groups like Joy or Momo or Geo, have had their relationships confirmed, well, there's fan annoyance for sure.
Oh, definitely.
But the reactions have become increasingly manageable. The consequences are no longer these career-ending disasters. A female idol can survive a relationship now.
But flip that dynamic to a male idol in a major boy group. Say, the rumored relationship between V and Jenny.
Right.
That scenario triggers a completely different, far more violent and financially punitive response. We're talking about massive fan boycotts that can paralyze album sales, the infamous protest trucks outside the company demanding action, and even life threats against the idol and their rumored partner.
What's fascinating here, from a systemic perspective, is the financial calculus that's underpinning this difference. The male idol's value is so often tied to the fantasy of availability.
The parasocial relationship.
Exactly. The sense that millions of fans could still have a chance with them. And that fuels these intense manufactured romantic attachments. That fantasy is core to his entire revenue stream, especially through merch and concert attendance.
It's the strategic suppression of basic human needs, specifically romantic or sexual relationships, deployed as a commercial strategy. The producer protects their massive revenue stream by maintaining the idol's single available image.
Any sign of genuine emotional autonomy or connection is seen as an existential threat to the capitalist model they build.
And this double standard extends right into how sexualization is perceived. We've seen female idols face immediate visceral condemnation and career jeopardy for simply reading a feminist book, for just suggesting independent thought.
Meanwhile, male idols are often sexually objectified in fan spaces with a shocking level of normalization, which the industry just tacitly accepts.
It's a bizarre and really disturbing dissonance. You have conversations circulating on social media about male idols' genitals that are, described by observers as extremely creepy, and they're often met with a lukewarm public or corporate reaction.
And the data backs this up.
It does. Look at the data.
Rough.
The idol Jungkook was, at one point, the only non-fictional figure to make the top 10 list of characters most associated with smut fanfiction on Archive of Our Own, the huge fan archive. Many of those fan fictions dated back to when he was still legally a minor.
Wait, okay, so if the fans' extreme sexualization of male idols is normalized and, you could argue, profitable because it drives engagement, doesn't that make the male idol the ultimate passive commodity? Isn't that also a deep form of structural violence, just dressed up as adoration or passionate fan culture?
Absolutely. The architecture of misogyny allows producers to profit from the availability fantasy of the male idol, selling that boyfriend image, while at the same time insisting on the dullification and moral purity of the female idol.
So they condemn the female idol for any hint of independent thought, like supporting feminism.
Right, while turning a blind eye to the extreme sexualization of their male counterparts by the very consumers they rely on. It's a market that commodifies all identities, but judges the expression of female autonomy far, far more harshly.
And when you start tracing these lines of sexual exploitation and financial power within the entertainment industry and beyond, the absolute roadmap for how it functions, it leads directly to the Burning Sun scandal.
Yeah.
This wasn't just celebrity gossip or a few individual bad actors.
No, this exposed the entire entrenched architecture of corruption at the intersection of K-pop celebrity, deep state protection, and organized crime.
It was a watershed moment. The public was forced to confront the systemic shadow operating just beneath the glamorous surface of Gangnam nightlife.
The allegations were staggering, and they were so wide-ranging, centering on clubs like Burning Sun and Monkey Museum. We saw illegal club operation, massive financial embezzlement, extensive drug use and distribution, including psychotomimetic drugs like GHB, commonly known as a date rape drug,
Yeah.
and systemic prostitution operations.
And the level of police collusion that was documented was not just incidental, it was foundational to how the club operated.
We know that the co-CEO, Lee Sung-han, testified that he paid 20 million won, which was about $17,000 at the time, to a former Gangnam police officer named Kang,
And what was that for?
specifically to cover up an incident involving an underage clubgoer. That was the price of keeping the incident out of the headlines and out of the courts.
A bribe to make a problem disappear.
And that's just one example of the deeper entanglement. The scandal implicated high-ranking officials. We have the case of Yoon Byujun, who is referred to simply as the police chief in the chat rooms of the perpetrators.
The police chief.
He was arrested for accepting massive bribes and subsequently misusing his power. He was allegedly informing Seungri, the central celebrity figure, and his business partner Yoo In-sik about impending police crackdowns. He was essentially giving them a permanent head start.
That is the structural incentive laid bare, isn't it? This wasn't a one-off error. It was a sustained, calculated collusion loop where club operators used police and political protection as insurance to ensure their illegal activities, which heavily relied on the objectification and systematic exploitation of women as sex tools, could operate with utter impunity, all disguised by the celebrity frontman.
As journalists covering the scandal noted, the story wasn't just about misogyny and illegal spy cameras. It was a massive revelation of the deep connection between prostitution rings, drug trafficking networks, and entrenched police corruption that had been operating undisturbed for years.
So it revealed a repetitive, predictable pattern.
A pattern of male power dynamics using systemic protection to objectify and commodify women. That was the real story.
And as corrosive and centralized as the Burning Sun scandal was, the Nth Room scandal revealed a different, distinctly decentralized and digital form of systemic violence. Blackmail, used as a scalable business model. This takes the exploitation out of the luxury club and puts it into the most private and vulnerable spaces of the victims' lives.
The mechanics of the Nth Room are truly chilling because of their cold, calculated efficiency. Perpetrators targeted vulnerable women and girls, often through social media platforms, using the lure of fake part-time work or modeling opportunities.
So they start with something that seems harmless.
Exactly. Seemingly harmless requests. But then they would quickly move to phishing for deeply personal identifying information, bank accounts, legal names, home addresses, all under the deceitful pretense of depositing wages.
Once the perpetrators had that identifying personal data, that's when the coercion and blackmail began.
That was the hook. They would terrorize the victims, forcing them to produce increasingly violent and degrading sexual content, often filmed under duress. And this content was then monetized via cryptocurrency payments within encrypted invitation-only Telegram chat rooms, designed for maximum harm and maximum anonymity for the perpetrators and the consumers.
What is so deeply tragic here, and essential for understanding the social cost, is the feminist paradox surrounding these digital platforms.
Activists, especially feminist activists who often challenge traditional norms, they rely heavily on digital anonymity and encrypted platforms like Telegram for their basic safety.
Why is that?
Because public platforms like Twitter or Facebook are often just dominated by intense anti-feminist harassment campaigns and doxing. They're forced into encrypted spaces just to organize and exist safely.
So they seek refuge in these encrypted platforms because the public sphere is too hostile.
But it is that very same anonymity the feature designed to protect marginalized voices. That is simultaneously the primary tool perpetrators use to run these vast digital sex crime rings like the Nth Room, exploiting hundreds of women and minors. That contradiction is just devastating.
And the legal response, I'm guessing, was not up to the task.
Sadly, no. It remains dangerously inadequate. Law enforcement is often ill-equipped and technologically behind the criminals operating in these decentralized, encrypted spaces, and victims frequently face intense social backlash and secondary victimization through pervasive victim-blaming discourse, which makes the act of coming forward terrifying and often economically ruinous.
And crucially, the law struggled significantly with classification.
For a long time, yeah. Illegal footage obtained through these coercive means was often legally classified as mere obscene pornography, rather than the illegal filming and exploitation that it truly is.
So the legal language didn't even capture the violence of the act.
Exactly. And while changes have been made to rephrase this as illegal filming, the fundamental distinction remains incredibly difficult to enforce effectively. The single biggest need for these survivors is the immediate and continuous deletion and monitoring of their images online, which is a logistical nightmare for authorities.
It reveals that even in a nation globally recognized for its technological prowess, the state's mechanisms for social and legal protection are lagging dangerously behind the technology used for widespread human exploitation.
The technological advancement is being exploited by the criminal element faster than the justice system can react.
And this digital violence, the club corruption, they're modern symptoms of a deeper historical truth. The state's regulation of sex and sex work in Korea has always been intertwined with national and imperial interests long before the K-pop machine ever existed.
If we really connect this to the bigger historical picture, we see a long, persistent history of state control over women's sexuality and bodies, often justified in the name of economic or military stability.
You can trace it back pretty far.
Oh, yeah. We can trace the roots back through the Japanese licensed prostitution system, right through the post-World War II era, when the Korean government actively managed the Kijichan sex workers.
Okay, you need to tell us more about the Kijichan. What were they?
The Kijichan were the villages and zones specifically established for sex workers who were serving the U.S. military personnel stationed in Korea. And crucially, this wasn't an unregulated zone. The Korean government managed this system. They required registration and critically mandatory STI testing for these women.
So the state was regulating the women's bodies not for their personal well-being, but as a mechanism of social and public health control.
A mechanism enforced to protect the foreign military personnel and to ensure a smooth military alliance.
That's unbelievable.
The women were trapped in this paradox. They were simultaneously stigmatized as immoral carriers of disease and social blight, while being actively commodified and medically controlled by the state for the national interest and for the economic benefit derived from the U.S. presence. It's a very dark history of state-sanctioned exploitation.
But history also shows that sex workers were never entirely passive victims of this control. We see these incredible examples of resistance.
Yes, resistance was always present. A key example is the protest in 1970, where 70 U.S. military sex workers gathered to publicly condemn a commander who had abused their human rights by posting pictures of those with STIs.
Wow.
They fought back against the abuse and the invasive management systems. They were demonstrating a demand for dignity and human rights, even within this highly controlled context.
Okay, so let's fast forward to 2004 and the introduction of the Special Act on Prostitution. This law was driven by anti-prostitution feminist movements who viewed sex work primarily through the lens of the oppression paradigm.
Meaning they saw it strictly as gender violence and sexual exploitation.
The intent of the law was certainly noble, to move the conversation away from a moralistic viewpoint and treat sex work as a violation of women's rights.
But the effect on the workers themselves was catastrophic. By criminalizing all those who engage in prostitution, not just the exploiters and the pimps, the law eliminated the visible, semi-licensed areas and simply pushed this massive industry entirely underground.
Prohibition. As we know globally, it did not eliminate demand. It just diversified the risk and increased the danger for everyone involved, especially the workers.
The numbers unequivocally underscore the scale of this policy failure. After the law was implemented, visible red light districts did decrease from 69 in 2002 to 44 in 2014.
Okay, so on the surface, it looks like it worked.
But look at what happened to the covert market. The number of busted covert sex businesses surged, increasing from about 2,000 in 2010 to over 4,700 in 2013.
So the industry didn't disappear.
It metastasized. It simply moved into smaller, less safe, and harder to regulate spaces like massage parlors, office tels, and online booking systems.
And the economic footprint is just staggering. It underscores the impossibility of prohibition.
In 2011, the estimated total demand for prostitution services was over 20 trillion Korean won, which is roughly 18 billion US dollars.
18 billion.
That is a colossal hidden economy that prohibitionist policies failed utterly to contain or regulate safely. It's an economy that rivals the legal cultural exports we were just talking about.
And this prohibitionist framework, particularly its reliance on the oppression paradigm, it means the law is inherently blind to the most marginalized populations within the market.
Like women engaging in survival sex, for instance, the elderly Bacchus ladies.
We need to pause and explain who the Bacchus ladies are.
They're typically elderly women, often in their 60s, 70s, or even 80s. They congregate in parks or near subway stations to sell Bacchus, which is a popular energy drink, but they also resort to soliciting sex work simply to survive.
Why?
They do this because the social safety net failed them catastrophically. They're often widowed or divorced or abandoned by children who cannot or will not support them, and they have few other rational, immediate options for a basic livelihood.
It's a poignant example of the intersection of economic marginalization and structural failure. They're being criminalized by a law that was supposedly designed to protect victims of violence, yet they are victims of an economic system that refused to protect their elderly welfare.
Precisely. And this foundation on the oppression paradigm, the idea that sex work is strictly violence against women, it also creates a massive blind spot regarding male sex workers.
Because the law is framed purely in terms of violence against women.
The police focus primarily on visible female sex work. They largely ignore male sex work, which includes both heterosexual and homosexual activities.
So male sex work is still illegal, it's still dangerous, but they're completely unaccounted for and unprotected by the system that was designed, in theory, to protect victims of sexual exploitation.
Their invisibility only compounds their danger. This selective focus reinforces the very gendered narrative the law was supposed to break. It shows that the system's blind spots create their own profound dangers.
So if we move from the economics of that hidden industry to the intimacy of digital life, we see the younger generation, what's frequently termed the MZ generation in Korea, trying to navigate dating, relationships, and sexuality in a deeply contradictory culture.
And we should clarify, the MZ generation is a Korean term used to group millennials and Gen Z together, usually those born from the early 80s through the early 2000s.
Right.
They share similar digital and economic experiences, and they are experiencing a rapid, undeniable shift toward greater sexual openness and more casual relationships, influenced by global media and technology.
Yet that shift clashes violently with the traditional conservative social norms, particularly around the public disclosure of your personal life. The family unit is still paramount. It reflects a collectivistic culture where dating and marriage often involve the extended family's involvement and approval.
You see this play out clearly in data concerning dating apps. Studies show that South Korean users of dating apps like Tinder are highly hesitant to disclose their dating app usage to their friends or family. There's a strong internalized social pressure to hide the use of mobile dating apps.
So the technology enables this efficient, low-cost intimacy. But the social consequence of being discovered, of dating someone considered improper and bringing shame to the family, remains incredibly high.
It's a culture of private liberty and public conformity.
And this demand for conformity is amplified significantly for queer Koreans. And this isn't because same-sex desire is some new import. It's a journey layered with history, but it's weighed down by modern social pressure.
That historical presence is so important to acknowledge. We know same-sex desire has existed throughout history. I mean, you look at the Hwarang, literally the flowering knights of the Silla Kingdom. These were elite male youth groups, sometimes referred to playfully as Hwanang or flower girls.
And you see it woven into the performing arts traditions, too.
Like the Namsadang itinerant troops, where new male recruits, known as piri, were traditionally expected to take on passive sexual roles and wear women's dress during performances. This just demonstrates that non-heterosexuality isn't a modern invention. It has strong, deeply embedded historical echoes within Korean society.
But the modern reality, despite those historical echoes, is governed by what social analysts call the social compact.
The social compact is the unwritten, unspoken rule that dictates the terms of existence for queer Koreans. It says, essentially, you can exist, but only if you do not assert a public, visible out identity.
So being out and proud, as is common in Western queer activism, is often deemed wholly not of Korea.
And the cost of asserting a visible public identity is often the trauma of losing your communal membership, losing family ties, and losing your job security.
That quiet existence is the mechanism of control. It allows the culture to maintain its facade of traditional conformity by demanding that non-conforming identities operate in invisibility.
And that is precisely why figures like the artist and activist Heezy are such a radical, extreme outlier. He chose to adopt a political, public, almost westernized gay identity, turning his visibility itself into an act of direct resistance.
Heezy's performance art was deliberately designed to be provocative, to shatter that comfortable social silence and violate the social compact. I mean, think about his piece, Peter, where he dressed in a blood-spattered school uniform, just sitting passively.
It was designed to force society to confront the violence, the pain, and the systemic displacement experienced by cast-off queer youth.
He was working to bring out of the shadows the critical need for safe spaces, like the Rainbow Youth Shelter, for young people who are cast off like defective toys by their families. When a relative suspected his friend Minsu was gay and tried to entrap him online, those pages of evidence were literally presented to their father as grounds for disinheritance.
Disinheritance.
That is the severity of breaking the compact.
That aggressive visibility is political precisely because it deliberately breaks the social contract of silence. In a culture where identity and acceptance are often conferred by the comfortable recognition of others, Heezy's public action is a rejection of the quiet, invisible existence offered by the system. He forces the public to do the difficult, uncomfortable work of acknowledging his identity, making it impossible to ignore the marginalized communities.
So let's try and bring these threads together and synthesize what we've seen. We started with the flawless export, the K-pop dream, the Hallyu wave, and we've seen how that dream is only sustainable through the rigorous, often hidden enforcement of control mechanisms.
The same system of control that dictates an idol's body mass to the 10th of a centimeter and drives young women to anorexia is the same kind of absolute control that protected the criminal power structures of the booming sun, ensuring police collusion and impunity.
And the system that demands absolute romantic and sexual purity from its visible female performers is the same system that leverages digital anonymity to perpetrate the violence of the nth room, exploiting the digital vulnerability of women and girls, including activists themselves.
The demand for the perfect image. It's not a benign aesthetic preference or some market trend. It is the direct fuel for the hidden machinery of violence and exploitation. The facade isn't just beautiful, it's profoundly functional.
It obscures the massive $18 billion criminal economy.
It hides the history of state-sanctioned sexual commodification, and it silences the victims, whether they're bullying survivors caught in legal ambiguity, elderly women engaging in survival sex, or queer youth resisting the compulsion to hide.
The entire system of cultural success rests on the suppression of autonomy, truth, and safety for those operating in the shadows it creates. When a marginalized group attempts to assert an authentic identity, they are often resisting a system that has been historically managed and policed by the state in the name of national purity or economic stability.
It raises an essential question about our role as global consumers, If we, as a global audience, continue to consume and adore this cultural output, knowing that the structural integrity of the facade relies on maintaining these violent secrets, how much of that global adoration is actually a passive financial endorsement of its deepest, most violent truths?
It's a transaction we need to examine much more closely than we currently do. It's the ultimate cost of cultural perfection, and the price is paid in silence.
Indeed. It forces us to ask, what truly happens when a society prioritizes marketability over morality?
We'll be back next time to dive into something equally revealing about the world's hidden power dynamics. Think about the hidden costs of eternal life, the quest for the ultimate longevity treatment, and who profits from selling the promise of immortality to the world's billionaires. This episode is powered by NKMedia for stories they said were too real to tell.